Hi everyone, my name is Chris, and welcome to my board game guides. Today, I'm going to be doing a review of one of my favorite two-player games of all time, Twilight Struggle. Now, Twilight Struggle takes place in the Cold War immediately after World War II, where Germany has fallen and Europe finds itself divided into communist Eastern Europe and the side supported by the US, Western Europe. And this game stands as one of my favorite games because it's got a lot of strategy, it's got a lot of interesting decision making that you have, and it's got a lot of tension. And let me explain that in a little bit more detail. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the game is a card-driven war game. So every action that you take in the game is determined by what cards you get. So there will be a variety of cards. There will be USA cards, like US-Japan Mutual Defense Pact. There are cards for the USSR, like Suez Crisis. There are neutral cards. And of course, there are scoring cards. And all of these cards together basically run at the heart of the game in that you're trying to get control of various regions on the board. So let me pull that out. So this is the giant game board. There are regions that are very clearly marked out on the map, like Central America, South America. You have Africa coming into play. You have Europe, of course, Middle East, and Asia. And one of the big parts of the game is that each turn, every person will play a card. And the card can affect the board in a variety of ways, whether it allows you to expand your influence on the board, allows you to remove your opponent's influence on the board, allows you to perform some crazy action that allows you to basically push influence from other areas of the board into a specified region, or allows you to get points through the scoring cards. Now, when I say the game has a lot of strategy and interesting decision making, that kind of rolls into one idea, in that every turn, like I said, you will be dealt a hand of cards. Some of these cards could be events that apply to your side. If you're the, let's say, in this instance, I'm playing as the USA. There can be events that apply to your side, or they can be events that apply to your opponent's side. And the interesting decision making comes into how you manage your hand of cards. For example, if you're the USA, well, playing Eastern European unrest to remove the USSR influence in Eastern Europe could be a great thing for you. However, playing decolonization, which is a USSR card and allows the USSR to enter a strategically important place on the board, is not so good. Because if you play a card that belongs to your opponent, the event will also take place, and the event is usually very favorable towards your opponent. So each turn you have a hand of cards. Some of them might be good for you, some of them might be good for your opponent. The big thing that you have to do every turn is figure out which cards to play and in what order. For example, you have the European scoring card in your hand, so you know that Europe will be scored at some point. By using these cards, are you going to try to make a push for Europe? Are you going to try to use, say, Eastern European unrest to take control of Eastern Europe away from your opponent so that you can play a quick Europe scoring card and get the points from it? And on top of that, the question also becomes, in your mind, what scoring cards does your opponent have? Do they have, say, Asia scoring card? And if that's the case, is decolonization a no-go? Because that allows you to it allows the opponent to place influence in Asia. And if they have the Asia scoring card and you play decolonization, that just might set you back quite a bit. So the game comes with a lot of interesting decisions and a lot of mind games that go into the mix. So you're constantly thinking about, all right, what cards do I have? What can I do on this turn that will affect the board state? What can my opponent do? Because after you play this game enough, you will get a pretty good handle on what cards are available when and what regions come into play during which stage of the game. So let's say the turn takes place and you see your opponent placing a lot of influence in the Middle East. Do they have influence in the Middle East that would allow them to play a pretty big scoring card and in doing so get a lot of points? Are they trying to build up towards a different card that will give them points for having control of certain countries in the Middle East? But in that turn, the opponent also placed a couple points in South America. What does that to signify? So a lot of those decisions all come into play, and they force you to think about what's happening, what's going to happen, and how do you best deal with everything that your opponent is doing. So in a sense, you're trying to be proactive as best as you can to push your side's influence on the board, but you're also trying to react to the opponent's play to figure out, all right, what is he up to and how can I best disrupt the plans? So there's a lot of the whole Cold War mentality that goes on. The game gives you a sense of paranoia because you're never quite sure if your opponent's move is merely meant to trick you or if they're trying to go for some big grand strategy that you still haven't quite figured out yet. And on your side, you have a set of cards like, okay, this turn might be great for you because all the cards belong to your side, so you can basically impose your will on the board. But there might be turns where you have a hand of maybe 2 of your cards and the rest of them are your opponent's cards. All right, how do you deal with that scenario? Because it could be really, really tough to try to manage because you know you'll be giving something up in that turn. You just don't know how much of an advantage it'll give to your opponent. So a lot of people have likened Twilight Struggle to kind of like a knife fight between 2 players because you know that by stepping into a knife fight, you're going to get hurt. Your opponent is going to get hurt. The question is, who's going to get hurt more and who will eventually be the one to be the last one standing in this Twilight Struggle, the board game that pits the USA against the USSR in the Cold War. So if you're a big fan of games that feature heavy strategy, heavy tension, little amount of luck, then this game is definitely for you because although there are dice in this game, the dice don't figure as heavily, and if you're a good player, you will pretty much be able to win every time. If you're not a big fan of high tension games, if you're not a big fan of really combative kind of games, if you're not a big fan of learning all the cards, because one of the big ways to get good at this game is to know what cards come out when. If you're not a big fan of that, you're not willing to take the time and effort to learn it, this is not for you. This game does not really cater towards casual players because the level of effort that goes into mastering this game is just really steep. And once you've reached a high level of mastery, it's really hard to be able to find opponents that are able to match your skill level and also provide a really engaging game. But that shouldn't stop you from introducing them to this in the hopes that they will enjoy it and take the time to learn, because Twilight Struggle is a great game with a lot of strategy, a lot of interesting decision making, and a lot of tension. And that's what I look for in great board games. That's why Twilight Struggle is easily a game that gets into my top 5. Hope you guys found this review useful. If you want to hear more from me, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. All right, thank you very much, everyone.